Thanks for coming in. I'm Kevin Metcalf, and this is the Uncolored Video Cast. That's what I'm calling it. I'm sticking with it. Today I wanted to talk about something I call empty vessels. It's in a rhetorical sense. But what an empty vessel is a name or term that really doesn't have a meaning in and of itself. As a matter of fact, you can put whatever meaning or attach whatever meaning you want to it. This is something that I think certain people do to force a standard of judgment on others that isn't attached to any objective standard. Because if there's an objective standard, then I can't do what I want to do. But if there's a relative standard, then I can pose pretty much what I want to do. And it's a bit abstract, and so I'm going to go back just a little bit. The big idea, this the theory that all of this is about, what it states is that there's two ways to understand reality, two basic worldview ideas. The first idea is that there's a creator of everything that has been created. Anything that has a beginning, there's a creator for it, or one creator for everything, really. The second idea objects to that, says that that's not true, that there is no God and things just happen from some spontaneous chance, happenstance way. Now, as I state in the big idea, whichever idea underwrites your worldview, the first idea or the second idea, there is a creator of everything or there is no creator of everything, or there's another way to look at the second idea that's a little bit, I think, smarter than just denying the first idea altogether. Another way you can do the second idea is saying that the creator isn't who the creator says the creator is. It's abstract, and I'll get into another idea. But the basic idea is that whichever idea that you use to underwrite your worldview almost forces you into one of two understandings of reality. An objective understanding of reality, that's from the first idea. And the second idea forces on you an subjective standard of reality, meaning reality is pretty much whatever I want it to be. I can kind of make up my own world and whatever I think is true. That's people who say things like, it's my truth, right? Like truth is somehow particular to them, and then your truth is particular to you, but somehow they're both true, even though they may conflict. What an objective reality says that whatever makes up this terrain of reality is out there. And your goal as a human being is to use the senses that you have to try and map this terrain as accurately as possible. In a relativistic view, I don't know why I said it that way. In a relativistic view, I put the stress on the wrong part of the word, then you can just make it up as you want. And whatever features in reality are out there, you can say they're not there, you can call them something different, you can explain them away, you can ignore them, you can do whatever you want to do, but it's based on how you feel it, a subjective way of determining what's out there. And so just to give you a more practical understanding of what the objective and the subjective is, there's a video, I should put that in there, by the guy that does Red Pen Logic. I can't remember his name right now. I'll stick that in right here. But as he explains, objective reality says that whatever the truth of that thing is in the object itself. So if I like hamburgers, that's a subjective sense. I like them, but maybe you don't. But the fact that it's a hamburger lies in the object itself. I can call it an elephant, I can call it whatever I want, but a hamburger is a hamburger. Doesn't really matter what I say about it. That's an objective reality. What an empty vessel does is it's an attempt, it's a rhetorical tool. It's a plane going overhead. What an empty vessel does is a rhetorical attempt to move objective reality into a subjective reality. So a word like political correctness, okay, that's an empty vessel. What it does is it says correctness isn't enough. Being correct or incorrect is an objective stance. But political correctness That's a subjective stance. That's whoever is in charge at that moment gets to tell you what's right and wrong, and it changes from moment to moment. And if you've ever been in any of these circumstances, if you've been at work and you've been accused or reprimanded for being politically incorrect, and you go, well, what did I say? They're never going to tell you actually why what you said is politically incorrect. They'll just say it's politically incorrect, and that's enough. See, with the subjective, I don't have to really even give you a reason other than the fact that it violates this name that I just made up, and that's enough. Other terms are social justice. Same idea. You know, I read you in Roger Scruton's book, Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. He illustrates what social justice is. And it has nothing to do with, you know, making everybody free and helping people out. Like, you know, I got to show you this clip. This is this is a guy, and he's a good dude. His name's Greg Couch. And he's talking about what social justice means and his understanding of it. Well, you know, I'll play it for you after I tell you what it really is. But the reason they make these terms up the way they do is because the term itself is, I think, calculated to be disarming. In other words, why would you have a problem with political necessarily, although some people like that, I don't. But political correctness sounds nice. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Social justice. That seems like a cool thing. Why would that be bad? You got justice in it and it's social. Here's some other terms. Authentically black. Doesn't mean anything. Or it just means whatever the person says it does. Blackness, right? All of these terms are what I call empty vessels. It means whatever the person wants them to mean at any time. And it can change at any time. So to understand a little bit better about what social justice is, or these terms, this person's name is James Lindsey. He's got a YouTube channel that I think is excellent, something that you should take a look at. And he talks about what this diversity or this thing is. He talks about what social justice is and the genesis and what it really means. And he'll show you that it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with what many people think it is.
So as many people are figuring out, the critical social justice movement tends to use words deceptively. It tends to use words with more than one meaning, or with non-standard meanings. And since I wrote the encyclopedia on this issue, Translations from the Wokish, on newdiscourses.com, let's break it down. We're going to start with diversity. So the word diversity sounds like it means something everybody wants, right? It sounds like, oh, we're going to have people with different backgrounds, different expertise, different perspectives. We're going to bring them in, and we're going to, get them all in one place, and it's going to be a diverse environment. But that's not specifically what diversity means within the ideology of critical social justice. Critical social justice uses the word diversity to mean commissars or apparatchiks. In other words, people who are trained in and believe in the ideology. You can read this explicitly for yourself, for example, in a diversity, equity, and inclusivity program that's being installed at the University of Texas at Austin, where what they write is that when they're looking for people to hire under diversity, what they're looking for is people who are trained in diversity, not necessarily people who look different or have different racial or ethnic or sexual or gender backgrounds. The reason that this is the case in critical social justice is that it believes that identity comes with a certain experience of life, and that certain experience of life confers privilege or oppression. And when you live that experienced privilege or oppression, that there's an authentic understanding of that. So if you speak with that authentic so-called critical consciousness, then you have skill in diversity. But if you deny that and you don't repeat the critical social justice ideology, then you don't have an authentic expression of diversity. And so you aren't actually diverse, or you're the wrong kind of diversity, or something like that. So diversity means hiring people who believe in critical social justice ideology, who might or might not happen to look different or come from a different background. If you want to learn more about diversity and the other terms that critical social justice misuses, visit Translations from the Wokish on newdiscourses.com.
So James Lindsey has this channel, The New Discourse. It's a good channel. I've listened to some of the conversations. They're excellent conversations, but he just shows that these terms, diversity, inclusion, all of those things have nothing at all to do with what you might think they mean upon first hearing them. What happens is that, like any, and I think it's a religion, I just think it's a cult. And like any cult, there's a very narrow range of ideas that you can have. There's a very narrow range of worldviews you can have. As a matter of fact, there's really just one. And all of these terms, social justice, inclusion, all of this stuff from this new woke religion, what they're saying is that if you don't think like us, you're going to get punished, right? Remember Gina Carano, what happened to her. If you do think like us, the world's going to open up to you. We want to give you positions of power. We want to put you into places of authority. We want to move you into institutions because you espouse our ideology. And that's the only ideology. It's a Marxist, socialist, it's a death ideology. It's certain death. You've seen it happen in other countries. We've seen it happen for 100 years over the last century. Any place these ideas are installed, they go against, when I say the natural order, things like merit, things like objective reality, things like truth. It goes against all of those things and tries to establish this weird cultish religion that puts certain people telling everybody else what is right and what is wrong, not based on an objective standard, but based on the subjective standard, based on whether or not you agree with their ideology. If you agree with the ideology, you're in. If you don't agree with the ideology, they don't want anything to do with you. And that's what these empty vessels are. They're specifically created to funnel everybody into this one ideology. And if you don't, you're in violation of diversity, right? If you don't believe in this Marxist socialist ideology, then you're anti-social justice, right? You're anti-inclusion, you're anti-political, you're anti the religion. And that's when you get punished. Because the goal of these ideas, when they're putting them into your companies and when they're doing these forced sensitivity training, they're establishing their religious ideology as the ideology by which you'll be punished by if you do not adhere to it. Right? So now I want you to see what some people think about this ideology, because again, it's so disarming that you can get a dumb idea about it if you don't spend time thinking about it. Here's Greg Couch. Greg Couch, not a dumb guy. He was a football guy out of college when I was a young guy. He's probably about my age. But I remember, I think he came out of Nebraska, went to the Cleveland Browns as a quarterback, didn't do very well. But since that time, he's gotten into journalism, and he's been a journalist for, 20, 25 years in Chicago. So he's not an idiot, is what I'm saying. This is what he thinks about social justice.
Do you agree with me? We'll start here, that the U.S. women's soccer team, their failure at the Olympics, they've gotten off easy. No one's questioning this team. Their failure bringing the bronze home. If that had been the men's basketball team, we'd still be ripping and shredding them and wondering what the hell's going on with men's basketball. But the women's soccer team seems untouchable. Am I right for calling this out?
Well, yes. All of women's sports are untouchable in the U.S. I mean, we've put all that money into Title IX, and women's American teams have dominated the Olympics for a long time, and they should. But the problem isn't whether they've got the money or the resources anymore. It's, can you criticize them when they fail? I think that they did fail because they're getting old, actually, for one thing, but also this focus on the political justice stuff, is social justice, has become, ridiculous. And it doesn't surprise me at all what Hope Solo said. I believe every word she said, okay? social justice started as something that was supposed to be helpful to people, a big-hearted thing to help people who have had a, bad shake and a bad, unable to have a fair shake and things. And instead, it's turned into something that's about bullying and intimidation. And it's just, you have to do exactly what these people want you to do, or else you're just a failure. You're a loser. There's zero critical thinking. It's you're on my side or you're against me. There's zero critical thinking involved in this, and you need to actually think inside the margins a little bit. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I think Hope Solo is right on the money, and the women's U.S. team deserve to lose, and they should be criticized for it.
So you can see what he's saying. First of all, in his idea, it's a big, social justice was a big-hearted thing, right? Designed to give people who had a bad shake, to give them a hand up, right? Completely idiotic. Anybody who thinks social justice has anything to do with helping people out is, a nice way to put it, beyond naive. Just naive. Roger Scruton, let me read that again. Where's the book? Where's Roger Scruton and social justice? Because it's one of the frustrating things about this social justice woke nonsense. It's not the nonsense that they put out there. It's simple to see how this is just dumb. But it doesn't seem like people do the work to just read a little bit about it from from somebody who may not disagree. Not what they're saying. Of course, you do want to read what they're saying because it's complete nonsense. It's being forced on you, so you don't necessarily have to read it. But look beyond the surface of what they're telling you about it. Here's Roger Scruton. The two goals of liberation and social justice are not obviously compatible, any more than were the liberty and equality advocated by the French Revolution. If liberation involves the liberation of the individual potential, how do we stop the ambitious, energetic, the intelligent, the good-looking, and the strong from getting ahead? And what should we allow ourselves by a way of constraining them? I'm going to show you something later on by a guy, Glen Loury, interviews, he wrote a book called The Meritocracy Trap that talks about this exact thing. Well, we'll get into that. Because merit is also a part of something that social justice hates. Because merit keeps their ideology from getting in and seeping into every word. If you get a job because you're better at it, you may not espouse their ideology. So merit is something that social justice and the woke hate because it oftentimes keeps their ideology out of institutions. Because, institutions generally, if they're smart, give positions based on merit. But it continues. By declaring war on traditional hierarchies and institutions in the name of its two ideals, therefore the left is able to obscure the conflict between them. Moreover, social justice is a goal so overwhelmingly important, so unquestionably superior to the established interests that stand against it, as to purify every action done in its name. So, whatever I do in social justice is good. What Jason Whitlock was bringing up was the U.S. women's team just miserably failed. Nobody said a word. Why? Because if you're a social justice advocate, if you're in the religion, you can't be criticized. Right? And to add on to that, another empty vessel that has become an empty vessel. It used to have meaning, but racism. Racist has no meaning whatsoever anymore. Everything's racist. And the goal of racism, or using that term, is to keep you from criticizing and scrutinizing their ideas. The whole idea of the woke religion is that anybody who's part of this woke religion, anybody who espouses social justice, anybody who says political correctness, anybody who says diversity, anybody who says inclusion, they're not to be criticized. Whatever they do is okay. That's what it's about, right? It's never been some big-hearted thing like Greg thought about giving somebody a leg up. Not at all. It's taking objective standards and turning it into subjective standards. So correctness, being correct, isn't good enough anymore. You have to be politically correct, right? Justice isn't good enough anymore. Everybody being equal under the law, that's not good enough anymore. No, it's social justice. Only the devout, religiously woke should get preferential treatment. If you challenge it, you need to be punished because you're not part of the religion. That's what these empty vessels mean. That's what an empty vessel is. It's a way to move the standard from an objective standard to a subjective standard so I can get my ideas in. Here's another example of it. This is what I talked to you about before the Glen Loury video. So this is Glen Loury. He's talking to a guy called Daniel Markovitz. And they're talking about this book that he wrote, The Meritocracy Trap. Now, I don't know. Glen Loury seems to be a nice guy, so I don't want to say anything negative. But the problem that I have with academia is if you look at this whole video, and you should, what you have here is two social engineers. And there's a good book called Thomas Sowell. It's right there. I couldn't think of it. Thomas Sowell writes a book called Visions of the Anointed, and he talks about this very thing that I think is going on here in this video, where you have this self-appointed anointed, a group of the elite, who feel it's their job to change society so that everybody else is fixed. And this, in my opinion, is a direct result of, and I think Glen Loury, these are part of the Enlightened, which is another philosophy that spawned the religion called humanism. But they also deny the existence of God, which means they become God. It's their job to change society so that it works for everybody. So they have this long discussion about the trap of meritocracy. And this Daniel Markovitz, in my opinion, is deceptively against meritocracy. And he wants people to be put in positions, not because they're good at what they do, but let me explain to you, I'll let him explain to you how he thinks positions, and he's talking specifically in academia, but there's no reason to believe that this idea would be constrained to academia alone. But this is Glen Markowitz's idea.
A third point, and then I'll stop, is there's an intermediate way of organizing this. I actually had this conversation in an appointments context recently. The way in which people are hired, admired, promoted in elite universities is based increasingly on possessing and mastering a set of techniques rather than having something true to say about important problems.
So this is his idea, that somehow people getting positions based on their acumen for that particular positions, based on how they can, execute their office. It may not be the best way to hire people. It might be them having something true to say about something important. Well, who determines that? Who determines what's true and what's important? Well, if you're in the woke religion, guess what? You do. You get to determine what is true and what is important, and you get to hire people based on that idea. So meritocracy, or the idea of meritocracy, that is an obstacle to the woke religion. We don't like people getting positions based on their ability to do their job. No. We want people who have the ability to say something true about important issues. And guess who gets to pick what's true and what are the important issues, right? The woke do. So these empty vessels, again, are specifically designed to create this narrow window of ideas. And if you're in that narrow window of ideas, we're going to put you in those positions of power, regardless if you can do the job. We don't care if you're good at it. You espouse the right religion, we're going to put you there because we think you can say something true about something important. But if you don't, then we get to keep you out. We don't care if you're better at the job. That's not our concern. Right, here's another, again, I found an insane example, but this is an example he uses where he thinks merit is not necessarily a good thing. And he uses the example of Olympic athletes.
Entertainment, some TV shows are popular, some movie stars are billable, etc. Everywhere I look, I see stratification and hierarchy in the provision of services to people when it is visibly possible to rank their performance. So are you against all of that, or is that, yeah?
Yeah, look, there's always going to be some, right? The question is how much, and how much the hierarchy is tied to social status and economic reward. So take sports, which is a fascinating example. Yeah. 6-8 months ago, I saw somewhere on the internet a side-by-side video clip of the winning vault in the Women's Olympics in 1956 and 2012 or whatever it was. And, the woman in 1956, ran up to the vault, did like a flip and landed. The woman in 2012, did 3 flips before she got to the vault, right, flipped onto the vault, did 6 spins and landed. Right. Now, here's a serious question. Which form of sports competition, of Olympic competition, better promotes the human interest in sport? The 1956 woman was able to compete without destroying her bones and joints for the rest of her life, without probably acquiring an eating disorder as part of her training.
So I just want to stop right there. Here's this question. Which performance better promotes the human interest in sports? Now, just a couple of things about that. This is a show your work issue. First of all, I don't know how you quantify that, but why is that your job now? You see what I'm saying? These anointed feel like they look out at the world and they go, I want to have control of everything. And now it's my job to figure out the best way to promote human interest in sport. How do you get there? How in your brain do you somehow get to the point, you know what? I need to decide what's a better way for sports to happen. Because it's my job now to figure out how do you promote the human interest in sports. This is this self-anointed God of the world, where I'm going to create systems to make the world the way I think it should. That's what socialism is about. That's what the whole Marxist idea is about. Everybody's got to be the same. And there's a group of lords at the top who tell everybody how they should think, what they should earn, what they should do, and how they should enjoy society. That's a second idea concept. First idea concept, individual liberty. You get to decide how you want to live your life. You get to decide what you do. And what they've done here in this whole conversation is, and I'm sorry I'm taking so much of a cut, but it's crazy. But this whole conversation is between Glen Loury and this Daniel Markovitz is how can we as intellectuals and academics fix society for those people that we think aren't doing what we think they should be doing. That seems like a fundamentally arrogant way to approach the problem. Because it seems to me that there are groups of people all over, and they're talking about, they're both economists, or at least Glen Loury's an economist, and they're talking about these ideas about how, you can get blacks and Hispanics into economics because there aren't many blacks and Hispanics in economics. They're all Asian and white. Well, why think that it's a top-down problem and not a bottom-up problem? In other words, why think that it's somehow the problem of STEM fields to change how they do business to get different colors of people in a group, rather than figure out why certain cultures aren't putting a high value on learning the skills to get them into those fields? Because I'll tell you, it ain't all the same. right? In black families, sorry to tell you, it's sports, not academics. It's sports, right? You score 4 touchdowns, much more. It's much more of a value in black families, generally speaking, than getting 4 A's on your report card. They'll take the 4 touchdowns. Okay, not every culture is like that. So rather than them looking at it from a point of, well, how can we change academia or change the standards so we can get these people in? There's nothing in this whole conversation about what are the particular cultures who aren't getting in doing that's keeping them out. See, all of these ideas are, we're God, and it's our ideas and screwing with society that's going to fix the world. And so to be able to do that, we've got to get people with our social engineering ideology in there. That's the having something true to say about an important issue. That's what he's talking about. Got to get my folks with my same ideology in these positions of power, because if we go just on merit, they may not get in, right? If it's just about, how well you can perform, well, certain folks aren't going to get in. And we want them in, so we need to change things to make that happen, because, again, it's our vision as these high academics that that's what the world should look like. That's it. Because they're the gods of their universe. So let me just finish. So he started off by saying, hey, the girl that can do 1 flip, that's enough. We don't want anybody doing more than 1 flips, because somehow that, doesn't promote general interest in sports. And again, I don't know how you come to that conclusion, but that's his idea. Here he continues.
Without taking performance-enhancing drugs. The 1956 form of the Olympics was one in which you and I could sort of participate, imagine that we were doing something similar when we go out and play sports. Whereas the current version is one in which, it's like a freak show. You watch what these people do, and they can do things that I can't play with them. They're not playing the same game I'm playing. And so there's a way in which, both for the athletes and for the rest of us, a less extremely competitive, less hierarchical form of athletic competition serves what makes sports great for us better than the current version, which damages the athletes on their quest for advantage and makes sports not something we can participate in, the rest of us.
Listen, I found that stunning. That an intelligent person can have that analysis of excellent human performance. And you can hear it's all about him, right? You've got these people who are just excellent. They're gifted at what they do. It doesn't have to be sports. It doesn't have to be sports, math, science, art. There are people who are just gifted at certain things. But his idea is that makes me feel bad. I can't participate now because their people are so great. So somehow their excellent performance is bad. And you notice all of the negative pejoratives he put on these athletes who are doing whatever they can to be the best, right? They're abusing their bodies, the performance enhancing drugs, the bones and whatever the negatives that happen after it. Now, I don't know if that's the case for Olympic athletes. I haven't heard about that with regards to specifically gymnastics. But clearly there are some sacrifices that certain people make to go farthest. The point I make is that should be up to them. It should be up to those individuals. If they want to go for it, let them go for it. Listen, I was a big, during the steroid era in baseball, I was a big baseball fan, right? Once they stopped the steroids, I stopped watching. I'm just not, I was never a huge baseball fan, but sitting all day looking at a 0-1 game, this is not my thing for 4 or 5 hours. But when they were juicing up and knocking out of the park, I was tuned in every night. Why? Listen, I know he's cheating, all this stuff. Fine, I don't care. But in my opinion, it's the individual. You want to do it? Go do it. And then you live with the consequences. But it's not up to some third party, some academic sitting in the room going, you know what, you're so great, it makes me feel bad about myself and what I can do, so I need to keep you from being great. But that's the idea of socialism. That's the idea of Marxism. And that's why merit is such an obstacle for socialists, for the woke, for people who think that everybody should have exactly the same thing, and anytime somebody doesn't have something that somebody else has, it's got to be some evil. And so those people who are excellent, those people who work harder, those families and cultures that prepare their children to meet the obstacles out there in reality, who have success because they do, and outperform those cultures who do not, and there's a marked difference in those cultures. I know, I've lived it, I've seen it. I spent 30 years, wading through different cultures, and you can see some cultures, academic performance, math, it's the highest thing. For some, it's all kinds of things that aren't academics, and you can see the results of that. Free people do what they want, but you have to live with the results. You can't have, again, this self-appointed, anointed group who say, you know what, because you guys are doing so great, we need to somehow stop you because these folks aren't doing that great in that area. And it makes them feel bad. But that's what this whole idea about meritocracy, against meritocracy is. But it's brought on, or it's helped empty vessels oil the wheels for this horrific, authoritarian, socialist machine. Because they make up these terms, diversity, inclusion. They all sound wonderful. You had the Greg Couch thought it was a feel-good thing. I heard Colin Cowherd once say that political correctness was just to stop hurting people's feelings. Right? Idiotic ideas. But that's the whole goal of using those kinds of terms. Because it allows whatever you want to seep in. And by the time you figure out that it's some pernicious thing to punish those who aren't part of the woke religion, well, it's too late. It's already in there. The well is already poisoned. Right? Now I say it's too late. I'm not saying it's, I don't know if it's too late. I'm just simply saying the poison's already happened by the time you figure it out. So my point is, you have to stop being ignorant about these ideas of diversity and those things. And when people say those things, you have to ask them, what do you mean? When you say social justice, why isn't regular justice okay? When you have people like Glen Loury and this Markovitz guy talking about, hey, we need to stop gymnasts from doing a whole bunch of flips because it makes other people feel bad. Why? Why is that okay? Personally, I think that the whole idea that people are so rabid about sports is because I think human nature, we're drawn towards excellence. We're drawn towards the very best. If you can shoot, if you can lift 100 pounds, I want to lift 200. Right? If you can run the 100 in 10 seconds, I want to do it in 9. That's the human nature. I want to see how excellent, how close to perfect I can be. So this idea that it somehow, isn't the best way to promote human sports, that's just for, I don't want to do that. That's a bad idea. And how this Markovitz can get that idea just seems, I don't know. He seems to be full of bad ideas. And Glen Loury, I like Glen Loury, and it's not like Glen Loury didn't challenge his ideas. But this is the buddy-buddy thing that academics do, I think Markovitz's ideas are vile. And they're against human nature. That's what I think. But you don't get those kinds of challenges in academia. They kind of sit and have coffee together and laugh about all this stuff. Meanwhile, their pernicious ideas filter down to the rest of the country, right? And we have to deal with the consequences of their bad ideas. So finally, on this topic of empty vessels is another aspect of it. What happens is these ideas, these empty vessels are promoted by, I think, the enemy. And when I say the enemy, I'm talking about any specific group of people. I'm talking about the enemy of all people, all humankind. But what happens is it starts to seep in to folks who recognize objective standards, the objectivity between right and wrong. And here's a clip of a guy named James White. James White is a theologian, and he has a channel called Dividing Line, and he talks about different topics. And here he's talking about, I'm not sure what it is, but he uses this term called that is common that you hear a lot, called human flourishing. Okay, human flourishing is just another empty vessel, right? It means all kinds of different things to all kinds of different people. And the point I want to make here is that I don't think these words should be used by folks who understand objective reality and who adhere to the first idea. I'm not saying you can do whatever you want to do. I'm simply saying that it helps muddy the waters. It's enough when the folks who hate our country, who hate God, who hate objectivity, who hate excellence, who hate individual liberty use these terms. I expect that. But when it starts seeping into the people who love and support the ideas that I just listed, when we start using these words, we continue to muddy the waters. That's why it's important to challenge these empty vessels, know what they mean, study them. James Lindsey has his Wokipedia, or I think it's Wikipedia. You should get the book, and you should read it and learn what these terms are from the people who created them. And then when other people use these words, you need to challenge them. But this idea of human flourishing, I hear it all the time. Got to promote human flourishing. This is not for human flourishing, right? It's an empty vessel. It's a term that will be used against you. So let's hear what James White says about it.
When a government demands that you do things that are fundamentally in opposition to being made in the image of God, things that are absurd, things that are untruthful, things that go against the reality of the created order, it is good for Christian people to stand up and to condemn such absurdities, because any government that continues in that way will not only destroy itself, but those under its authority. So if we want to stand for life, then we must stand for what is true and what causes human flourishing.
And so there he is. Everything he said up to that point, I 100% agree with. I even agree with what I think his idea of human flourishing is. Okay? Here's the problem. Sam Harris is also a proponent of human flourishing, right? Sam Harris thinks that unborn children murdered at 180 days, great idea. I don't think James White thinks that, right? Sam thinks that the demolishing of all religion, that's human flourishing. I don't think James White thinks that. There's a whole host of issues that James White would not think is human flourishing that Sam Harris thinks is the very definition of human flourishing. That's what makes it an empty vessel. And again, I hear people like James White all the time using that term, human flourishing. Got to promote human flourishing. Well, Hitler thought he was promoting human flourishing too, right? Everybody thinks that what they're doing is human flourishing. The Markovitz guy that I saw, he thinks that's human flourishing. I think it's vile. So terms like human flourishing, the greater good, right? Greater good sounds fantastic. How could you not be against, or how could you not love the greater good? Social good. Those kinds of empty vessels have no meaning, and whoever is in power gets to fill that empty vessel with whatever they want. And if you agree with it, you're going to be fine. But if you disagree with it, you can't go against it. Why? You're against human flourishing? What's wrong with you? You're against the social good? You don't like social justice? You don't get diversity? What's wrong with you? See, once you adopt those terms without knowing what they are, because there really isn't any meaning to it, you're stuck with the judgment of whoever is in power at that time. And there's three ways that people who reject objective truth, who are relativists, there are three ways to get their way. We'll do this in the next podcast. But there's martial coercion. That's guns, mobs, right? Hoods, all those things. There's financial coercion. That's you do what we tell you to do. You think like we want you to think. You inject yourself with this vaccine, right? Or you're going to lose your job. That's financial coercion, right? Or there's rhetorical coercion. Right? You're a white supremacist. White privilege, right? That's rhetorical coercion. White privilege is the same thing for white people that the N-word is for black people. The goal is to dehumanize you, right? If you're not as human as me, now I have the authority to control you the way I want because you're not human like I am. That's what they say when they're saying you got white privilege or you're privileged. What they're saying is your value isn't the same as mine as a human being. Therefore, I can do what I want to you. Same thing the N-word had. I'm making sure that you understand that you don't have the same humanity that I do. Right? That's rhetorical coercion. Martial coercion, financial coercion, rhetorical coercion. Those are the three ways that people who reject objective right and wrong enforce their ideas on you. And they use these empty vessels, right, as the tools of judgment. And it means whatever they want at whatever time, and there is nothing you can say about it. You can't go, well, that's not what it meant 2 weeks ago, right? That's not what you're doing to that person over there who seems to be violating the same thing. No. They believe their religion, so we're not going to criticize them. They don't get any punishment. They're part of the religion. But you doing the same thing, you're going to get criticized. Why? You got privilege. You're white privilege, so you're not part of our religion. We can punish you for that. That's what these whole things are about. So that's my whole thing on the empty vessels. Know what those terms mean, and use them, at your own detriment. In my opinion, that's not what I wanted to say, but I couldn't think of the thing that I wanted to say. And finally, what I want to do is I want to leave you with some wisdom from a guy named Delano Squires. This guy's brilliant. I see him on Jason Whitlock's excellent show, Fearless with Jason Whitlock. He often comes on as a guest. He comes on as a guest and tackles different issues. But I want as many people to hear these ideas because this kid is brilliant and I think right on point. So I'm going to leave you with Delano Squires talking with Jason Whitlock, and he's talking about sacrifices that families have to make to raise children properly. That means you can't have everything you want because you want to have a father, you want to have a mother home, and you want to help support those kids and guide those kids properly. And that takes sacrifices. So here's Delano Squires, and I'll just leave you with that.
There are sacrifices you have to make for each other and for the betterment of your family. You can't, mistresses and things like that. If you really want your kids to be successful, you got to sacrifice those things. And it seems so simple. I just don't understand why we can't talk about it publicly.
So two things, right? One, I'll share a personal anecdote. I remember one time, just a couple of years back, I was asking my dad, who's one of the smartest people I know. I asked him why he never went and tried to go back to school and get like an MBA or an advanced degree. And he turned and he looked at me and he said, "You wanted to eat, right?" And I knew immediately what he meant. My parents got married young. My dad might have been around 24. My mom was probably about 21. I came tumbling into the world exactly 9 months after they got married. And he had to make sacrifices in terms of his own career. And even though he probably could have gone on to get, he could have gone on to get an MBA or whatever advanced degree he wanted to get, he had to work. He had to work to support his family. They didn't have much. You know, we lived with an aunt for a period of time after they got married, and then, you know, moved from apartment to apartment until they got settled into their current home. But that struck me. And I realized that previous generations have sacrificed so much for us. This is across the board, regardless of race, color, creed, ethnicity. The people who came before us sacrificed a lot for us. And I get frustrated when I see us complaining a lot about how much they should have given us and didn't, or what somebody did 250 years ago, instead of us talking about what we are willing to sacrifice for the next generation. And for me, this goes to your point, Jason. I definitely appreciate you extending an opportunity for me to come on the show. And one of the things that I'm willing to sacrifice is my personal reputation. I'm willing to be called all of the ugly names that people call, quote unquote, black conservatives, if it means that my daughter can grow up in a world where the people who represent her don't high five the guys that make a living disrespecting her. I'm willing to take that heat. I'm willing to be called a coon and a Tom and a sellout if it means that it opens up some space for people like us to talk about the importance of marriage and family in the black community. And I'm willing to fight to see that, in terms of change that we want to see. I'd much rather have, particularly among low-income African Americans, 1,000% increase in the marriage rates among black folk who don't have college degrees. I'd much rather see that than 1,000% increase in corporate board diversity, right? The black middle class and the black elite, they're doing well. They have every home on Martha's Vineyard booked for the summer, right? They get to wave to the Obamas as they go by. They drive their nice cars. They claim to be oppressed, but if you look back 2 generations ago, their grandmothers, the average occupation for black women, particularly in the South in that time, was a domestic, right? Now those women's granddaughters pay other women to clean their homes, right? Because there's been so much progress over the last couple of generations. The black elite, as I said, and the black middle class are doing well. But in some of the communities that I live in and I frequent and I move through, there's not a single man who lives in the home with his wife and his children. And if we think that harassing white people is going to change that, then we're in for a rude awakening. So I'm willing to take some hits. I'm willing to take some heat. Standing next to you, I mean, you get a lot of smoke, and I'm willing to take that because I'm thinking about, I'm looking downrange, right? I'm as I've said before, I'm raising my grandchildren's parents, and I want my grandkids and my great grandkids to be able to look back and say, you know what, I respect Pop. You know, he was willing to risk some things so that we could live a better life. And if the worst thing that they say about me is that I criticize the Obamas and whoever else is in the black elite, I'm willing to take that.